Makes me happy I live in the relatively peaceful and forgotten hamlet of Annapolis, Maryland.
Except for the gunshots fired on Prince George Street Saturday morning.
Well, let's not get bogged down in the details.
Okay.
You good to go, Julian?
Give me 1 second. We're almost there. All right, you guys are live. If anyone needs anything, I'll be here in the background.
Great, thank you. All right, let me call to order and welcome everyone to the City of Annapolis Board of Appeals virtual meeting for June 2nd, 2020. The meeting's being broadcast on the City of Annapolis YouTube channel. My name is Bob Gallagher and I chair the board. Following city policy during the pandemic emergency, the virtual meeting allows the public to observe the meeting through a video link. Public also has the opportunity to submit written testimony for this meeting through an online submittal process available on the City of Annapolis website Forum Center. So we'll begin the meeting by asking our recorder, Tammy Hook, to call the roll.
Mr. Gallagher,
Yes.
Mr. Zazali,
Here.
Mr. Burnett, Mr. Burnett,
Andrew, say
Present.
here, Andrew.
I'm having computer problems over here, but I'm here.
All right.
Dr. Chen,
Here.
Mr. Dews.
Present.
Right, we have a quorum. So before we actually get into the agenda, just a couple of notes about the virtual format. So the people that you see on the screen, for the most part, are members of the Board of Appeals and counsel to the board, Ben Henry. As each case is called, the applicants, representatives of the applicants, and the city will also appear on the screen. It looks like we've got a couple already. And also participating in the meeting by audio only are our recording secretary, Tammy Hook, Julian Jock, who's managing the technical aspects of the broadcast of the meeting. Also participating by audio, we've got Joel Braithwaite, Assistant City Attorney and Counsel to the Department of Planning and Zoning, Cynthia Gudenius, Land Use and Development Planner, Jacqueline Rouse, Planning Administrator. I think Tom Smith is still here, is he? No? Yes, Tom Smith from Planning and Zoning. And who have I missed? Anyone? Okay. We ask everyone to mute themselves except when they're speaking. If you would like to speak during the meeting, raise your hand and unmute yourself and I'll call on you to speak. Members of the board should not mute themselves. You're free to chime in anytime you like. As I mentioned earlier, written public testimony is accepted through the online form center on the city website. Testimony submitted up until noon today is made part of the record tonight and forwarded to the members of the board, the city staff, and the applicant in advance. We've all received those comments. In order to allow additional testimony relating to matters that might arise, that arose during the last hearing, the record has remained open and continues until tonight in the continued case, and we'll do the same thing in the new case that we'll be hearing later tonight. So additional public testimony received up until the day of the resumed hearing also becomes part of the record and sent to all the members of the board and all the parties. And public testimony is also available for public review online at the city's website on the eTrackIt platform also. So have the members of the board had a chance to review the agenda? Are there any suggested changes or corrections? No. May I have a motion to approve the agenda?
I move to approve the agenda.
Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All right, the agenda is approved. We have minutes to approve, the minutes from May 20th, 2020, our first virtual meeting. Are there any corrections or additions to the meeting minutes? I have a motion to approve the minutes.
Motion to approve minutes.
Second,
Second.
thank you. All in favor?
All right.
Aye.
Aye.
All right, the minutes are approved. The next item on the agenda is the resumption of the public hearing in variance 2020-001. And Julian, if there are any other representative of the applicants you want to bring into the screen, you're welcome to do that now. This case is back in front of the board with public testimony we've received today to be considered and for the board to enter into deliberations. Before we get to that, I need to make a statement for the record. Since our last meeting, when this case first was presented, someone, not a party to the case, engaged me in a short discussion about lot coverage, specifically whether decks should be considered pervious or impervious, and whether the city's treatment of decks is consistent with critical area commission rules. At the time, I did not understand the inquiry to be related to this case, but as the several public comments now make clear, the treatment of decks, the imperviousness of decks is an issue for this case. And as it turns out, I also received an email just 1 or 2 days ago on the subject, and both the email commenter and the person I had the conversation with turned out to be commenters. So in light of those comments, which contravene our ex parte communication rules, I decided to recuse myself from participation in the decision in this case. I've asked Mr. Dizali, our vice chairman, to preside over the remaining matters in the case. So with apologies and gratitude, I hand the gavel over to Mr. Dizali, and I'd ask Julian to put me back in the waiting room until we are ready to call the next case. Thank you.
Thank you,
Christian?
Bob. Thank you. Okay, so without any further ado, the continuation of the variance special application 2020-001 for the purpose of admitting public comment and possible, I won't call it a rebuttal, but an addressing of those comments by the applicant and or the city is and board comments by the board members or questions, further questions by the board member is appropriate at this point.
Christian, I'm sorry. Can I ask a question real quick?
You surely can.
I just want to make sure that if the same person who Bob reached out to any other members of the board, that they also need to recuse themselves.
Okay, so have any of the, given the situation that Bob described, without any names, has anybody had any ex parte communications regarding this case on any subject, including, but not limited to, the discussion of decks as impervious surfaces or pervious surfaces?
Yes, I actually did have a discussion with one of the commenters, and I was going to raise it when given a moment, before I realized the relevance of the topic to this case.
Dr. Chen, is that, take this is the time if you want to recuse yourself, if you
So
want.
I do believe I should recuse myself.
Okay, so that leaves us 3. Well, I haven't asked the other 2. Andrew or Rob, are you guys clean, so to speak?
I haven't had any discussions about it.
Okay, well, that leaves 3 valid board members, including myself, which leaves us a quorum, enough of a quorum to vote, I think, right? We can proceed with 3, Dr. Nash? Anybody? It's been a while since we've had only 3.
You're good.
Okay,
We can
thank
proceed
you.
with 3.
So along with
Can I
my 2 other
interrupt?
colleagues,
I'm
we
sorry.
will deliberate the,
So I should go into the waiting room, I think.
I don't think that, I mean, you're welcome to, Nadine, when in past, we don't ask people to leave the chamber. So whether you're virtually leaving or physically leaving, it's not necessary unless you want to.
I did bring
Attend
her, I did move her to attendee. If you guys would like me to bring both her and Bob.
It doesn't matter. That's fine. They can watch in any capacity.
Just let me know when you'd like me to bring them back forward.
You understood. So with that, we had 7 unique, I prepared a little chart here, 7 unique opinions. 2 of them were duplicates submitted through parallel processes. They basically stacked up as 5 asking us to deny the application, 1 in favor of the application, and 1 neutral leaning towards in favor of. Of the 1 that was for, they were located within the affected required posting zone. The rest, their locations were not known, but at least 2 represented entities, Ego Action, which is a subsidiary of Eastport Civic Association, I believe, and Spa Creek Conservancy. You guys have had time to review those comments. Do you have any questions or comments that you'd like to add at this point regarding those comments? It's not necessary that you do, but if you do, this would be the time. I'll come back to you after that. I will go, seeing none, I will go back to representative of the applicant. And I got so many names on my thing here. I guess that is who is representing the applicant. I forget. Sorry.
I think that's us at Spire Architecture.
Oh yeah, there you are. Hi,
Gregory.
Hi.
Hi.
Did you have an opportunity to see the comments posted online or distributed electronically?
We did. Yes, we read through them, and I think we have some pretty simple answers that should resolve everything. We submitted some new images to Cynthia for graphics. I'm not exactly sure if we have to submit them as certain evidence or something like that. What's the proper way for us to show you?
Well, you can enter it
graphics
now. Anything you have. This is we are still open, and you are privileged as the applicant to submit. Well, let me think about that. If you submit something new, the public would not have an opportunity to comment on that new information. So at the risk of having it held open.
Maybe I can comment by voice, and if there's anything that needs to be clarified, we can go through that process. But would that be a good place to start, do you think?
I think testimony is probably, it's your discretion, of course, but I think testimony, if you feel it could adequately communicate what you're trying to, I would say we could start with that.
Perfect. Okay, so I think the main question that I am understanding is so much on everybody's mind is whether or not decks are considered pervious or impervious. So the sense that we got, or the way that we proceeded, I think at least has been intimated. We did a rain study at the, I guess, interest of the Critical Area Commission. Is water coming through these decks? At Cynthia's, in the process with Cynthia, that was not submitted as any certain evidence or whatever. So I figure I can at least let you know our intention was to find out, with the idea that it has always been, I guess, the unofficial policy that a single layer of slotted wood deck was considered just like open earth or pervious surface, and that 2 layers, I guess, was enough coverage that was considered impervious, like if it were concrete. So again, that was our question to the city. The city, I guess, confirmed that, yes, that's sort of the notion. From what I understand, there's no official policy one way or the other on that answer, and maybe that's what's in question, or we'll encourage the city to come up with an official policy that clarifies this. But the good news, I guess, about the situation for us is that answer doesn't matter for our situation, and hopefully I can explain why. So if the 2-layer deck system is considered impervious, in other words, just like a slab of concrete, that was the original calculations that we did that essentially shows our existing site as it stands is 61 feet over the allowable impervious surface. So by the kind of standard, if you have 61 feet over the impervious surface in the city, again, our operating procedure was if you have 61 and at the end of the project, you still have 61, you haven't changed it. So essentially what we were doing was replacing impervious deck with now new roof. So it was a 1-for-1 trade. You may be aware in the county, there's a certain requirement. If you do that, you have to reduce by 10%, blah, blah, blah. In the city, it's a 1-for-1 trade as for our last amount of understanding for the process. So based on that assumption or that notion, that was our original graphics that were submitted. That's the image, I guess, exhibit C that shows lot coverage and how the lot coverage is done. After these comments and speaking with planning and zoning, the concern of, okay, well, if that is not the case and decks are seen as essentially water passes right through them and it's just like open virgin ground, and you guys want to add 140 square feet of new impervious surface. So the way that calculation works, by our allowable lot coverage, we're allowed 25 in the LDA critical area. We're allowed 25% of our impervious of the lot size, plus another 25% of that 25%. So what that calculates out to, and if we need to go into that math, I can detail that more, but the notion here is that allows us 3,640 square feet of allowable coverage. So if we are doing the decks are considered just like open ground, we currently are covering 3,398 square feet. So 3640 minus 3398 leaves 242 open square feet that are still available. Our proposed addition is only 140 square feet. So even if we're just doing it by the allowable lot coverage on the site, with the addition, we still have 102 square feet that are open or allowable to still be covered. So in our world, either we're 61 feet over and we're grandfathered in, or we're 242 square feet under and we're only covering 140, which leaves us 102 square feet under. So I think it's semantics, but maybe that's a place where we can have a discussion. My understanding in discussions with Matt and from our office and with Cynthia is clearly, you know, if you're covering more space, you have to do a certain amount of remediation. And I think it's 2 trees and 4 bushes or some combination thereof would be required as part of the remediation. But other than that, we are within the allowable limits of lot coverage in this critical area designation. So I'm not sure that it's really the problem that seems to be being, you know, concerned by all of the letters. So maybe that's a good place for us to start the conversation.
Thank you. I think that does add a bit of clarity that may have been missing from some of the comments, but I will turn it over to board before I wade in here. My 2 remaining board members, if they have questions or comments regarding this additional information as it relates to the entire application or the public comments. Andrew?
I have no questions. Nope, I'm good. Thank you. I appreciate the clarification.
Sure. And if there's we have a graphic that shows all of this. If it's valuable, we can always submit it, but hopefully that I try to sum it up in words.
Rob?
That did kind of clear up a couple of things, but I did want to go back from prior meeting, and there was some discussion on how things are being mediated. And you had mentioned a few things. Can you kind of cover those again?
Sure. On one of the exhibits, we have a planting diagram. It is number D, maybe. What's exhibit D? Let's see. B is the calculations. D is the proposed planting plan. So she has gone through extensive sort of reforestation even before this was improved or approved in order to make the site more lush. She's done a lot of plantings. If you were to drive by there right now, the plan that we have here is already partially installed. And she is by far interested in making a lush, I guess, area. Some of the images actually that some of the detractors had submitted show very green areas with, you know, a lot of plantings all up and down the slopes. So there's no issue if there was a requirement that the board said, we want, you know, 6 trees and 8 bushes. I think there would be no problem from the applicant for whatever remediation would be needed. It's probably already extensively above what will be required from how much she's put in the past year.
Okay.
Thanks.
Sure.
I will ask the city to affirm the calculations that were presented here as testimony, whether they in general agree that they're correct or want to weigh in one way or the other.
Okay, so what they're talking about is lot coverage in the critical area. depending on the critical area designation. And oh, by the way, this is Cynthia from the Department of Planning and Zoning. I'm a planner. And so within certain designations, you're allowed certain lot coverage. As this lot existed before critical area regulations were enacted in the 80s, it's considered a grandfathered lot. And as a grandfathered lot that's under half an acre, they're allowed by right 25% lot coverage. And then again, as a grandfathered lot, you can have an additional 25% of the 25% with planting mitigation or some type of best management practice to offset that. And that's where Craig was saying, even if you looked at the decks, the multiple layered decks as not being lot coverage, existing lot coverage, they still meet their required lot coverage limitations. If you look at it that way, their original calculations were based on counting the multi-level decks as existing lot coverage. And again, those existed, as best we know, prior to the critical area regulations, so those would be grandfathered in. There is been some discussion and some concern about what, these multi-level decks, do they count as lot coverage or do they not count as lot coverage? The state code does not define that, and they leave it up to the jurisdiction to make that decision. In the past, the city has counted those multi-level decks as lot coverage. But to be on the conservative side, I contacted Critical Area Commission, and they suggested even potentially doing this rain study to verify that. And that's where that came from, was a suggestion by the Critical Area Commission. The applicant did that. And so that's where it was determined that, there really wasn't water getting through down to the ground. And so that it was considered as existing lot coverage. And since the decks are existing lot coverage and you're putting, a structure over that, there's no change in that existing lot coverage. That's where we are today.
Cynthia, I would like, if possible, to representing the city to address, there was one question about whether or not both these decks are they were built conforming or legally at the time. Does the city have record that they're there legally by right, or?
There's no record specifically about the decks being built. I did find late today in the file, I did find from 1979 an application to add an addition to the house, which looked like it was an addition for a garage and a bedroom on, I'll call it the left side of the house. This part of this plan did look like it was showing decks, but it's from 1979. It wasn't called out as far as, the areas being decks. You just showed a structure, what looked like the original structure, some rectangles coming off of the back of that, which appeared to be the decks, and then a hatched area that was showing the proposed addition. So that's the only thing that I could find in our records.
So board members can take that in any way they want, whether or not they believe the decks are there legally or not, or otherwise. It's pretty suggestive one way or the other, but you can make your own conclusion.
There's a couple other things I'd like to add if there's still time for comment on our end.
Yeah, you
Okay.
can.
I think in terms of that issue, I asked the homeowner if she knew of any, she's not the original homeowner, if she knew of any time that got added. She said that she did not, that she assumed that they were there when it was built. And I think we have to assume, unless there's some, evidence that that's not the case, just somebody saying that they were built after the time that it was allowed. I mean, I think that's a pretty bold statement to have no backup for. So for what that's worth. I think also someone addressed that there needed to be a critical area variance submitted. And to our understanding, that is not the situation because this is what is called a buffer modified zone. So I guess in summation, another commenter was saying that this applicant should be following the critical area laws as stated. And I would argue that we're following the critical area laws by the letter, maybe too much to their liking. We are following exactly what's allowed in buffer modified. We're following exactly what's allowed in this lot coverage. We're following exactly what variances need to be submitted, and that anything that has to do with lot coverage or the buffer management plan, that is taken care of in a second process, which we are aware is a whole nother process. But to the applicant saying that we're not following the procedure, I think I take issue with that being factual, because we're actually following it almost too greatly because this is so specific. So, if planning and zoning has any comments on that, then I'm missing something. But I think this has been a very precise application over a long period of time to make sure we were doing exactly what is required by critical area laws.
Okay, thank you.
Christian, I do have something to add to that. Like I said, this rain study was a suggestion made by critical area staff. There's no guidance on that. There's no policies on that. It's just, was a suggestion to see, whether they were impervious or not. And that information, that rain study was sent to Critical Area Commission, and they didn't want to make any comments and don't weigh in on that information. So there has been conversation with critical area staff regarding this matter.
And at the end of the day, I think what we tried to figure out was, would it matter if it did have rain go through or didn't have rain go through? And as long as it's all impervious decks are counted impervious or they're counted not impervious, I think it's either one way or the other, our plan still fits all the requirements.
Okay. So guidance from city here, I'm out of my environment. So that concludes public testimony. We're going to call that closing the public testimony portion of the hearing. Is that correct? Yes.
Thank you everybody for hearing our comments.
Okay. And because we are keeping with the new agenda to finish what we start, so to speak, we will go to deliberations first. Then we will take a vote, then close this variance application before moving on to the next agenda item. If I have that correct, is that how we're proceeding? Everybody agree with that? Yes. Okay. No comment. All right. So I'll open it up, starting with seniority as our tradition. Andrew, you're it, believe it or not.
That's scary that I'm the senior of the two, but no, I'm good. I don't have any questions or comments. I feel pretty comfortable having reviewed all the materials that we received today, all the comments that were submitted from the public, hearing the response to those comments from Mr. Martin, as well as the planning and zoning as to where we are here. So I don't have any questions or comments, and I'll defer to Rob to see if there's any additional discussion he wants to have before we make any moves.
No, I don't have any additional questions or comments. I think I've heard enough and reviewed the notes and the comments and the feedback, so nothing to add.
Okay. I will weigh in, as is my privilege and right here. The question of the decks and the grandfathered lot coverage, they were on my mind since the opening of this application for a variance from the beginning. I was pleased to hear that the architect and the owner was amenable to further discussions. I never like the but-for comments, but for the 1980 variance grandfathering in, or the fact that it's a deck and decks don't count as pervious. We know that all impervious surfaces aren't created equally, and a roof and a gutter discharging its water is superheated, high velocity water, which is an entirely different kind of water that is slowly trickling down through boards and reaching or not reaching down. So what I will ask is for a condition before the vote. It can be a condition before the vote, and I'll take comments from my two board members, is for the applicant to consider a way to adequately treat the rainwater from I'm a little confused as to whether it's 61 square feet or 100 and I forgot, I wrote it down, but the applicant knows what it is. Whatever the square footage is that is being created by this new roof And I acknowledge that it's not, I will not make the condition that it has to be the water from this new roof, but water equal to the roof area that's being added must be treated on site in some way, so that the net effect is measurably, at least in some small way, a measurable improvement to this lot rather than a doing no harm. Do my board members have an objection to that condition?
I don't. No, I don't.
I don't have an objection other than the ability to qualify that in a written opinion. It's slightly vague.
Well, treating rainwater on site is a very specific engineering, and Cynthia can we know what that means. That means it doesn't leave. It means it's rendered harmless to the environment before it's sequestered, before it re-enters the workplace, if you will. And that can be a rain garden. That can be a cistern that then slowly discharges it back later. I will leave that to the clever folks over there at Spire to satisfy the requirement. We're not going to play engineers.
We can check in with Matt Waters or Cynthia. We're glad to debate different options to make. We have no interest in making Spa Creek any worse in condition than it is. So we're glad to help out however we can.
Okay. With that, I will entertain a motion.
I'll let you, Christian, make the motion so that you can add all the conditions of the staff report as well as your own condition on there, so I
Okay.
don't mess it up.
A motion to approve the variance special application 2020-01 based on the testimony, the staff report, and meeting all the conditions set forth in I forget what section is, I don't have in front of me, for variances in the city of Annapolis, with the condition that the final design documents will treat the roof rainwater from the roof equal to or greater than the additional roof that's being added. That has to be treated on site in some capacity to satisfy the fact that the deck is considered impervious or pervious, but either way, roof is not deck. And barring any objections from council, I think that motion will survive.
I second the motion.
I'll
Okay, all in favor to approve the variance? Aye. I think we have
Aye.
3 ayes. Okay, the variance is approved. I will, in hindsight, I will add that we've approved a lot of variances of this regard. It is consistent with the board's behavior. It is not, there's no financial gain that could, from a construction design improvement perspective, there's nothing to be gained monetarily from this addition. It will cost them more than it will add to the value of the house. And for that reason, almost alone, this board is sympathetic to making a house livable on these lots.
Thank you.
And we tend to defer to the applicant when they are meeting all of the requirements of the variance requirement, but particularly when the occupant is doing it because they tend to extend their time in the house. That is something that the board has recognized as an important consideration. And with that, I will close the application. And with that, we will bring back and turn the meeting back over to Chair Gallagher and invite Dr. Nadine back to the board.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Thank you. See you guys.
Am I back? Yes.
In living color.
Can everyone hear me? Christian, thank you very much. And thank you, staff and the other board members for efficient and Solomonic disposition of that one. Our next case this evening is special exception 2020-002. Ben, to earn your pay, do you want to call the case?
Sure. Now calling SE 2020-02, a special exception by application by 110 Compromise Operator LLC. Property and owner Phillips Restaurant Group, business owner for a standard restaurant with an alcoholic beverage service, outdoor seating, a bar, live entertainment, and hours of operation indoors from 8 a.m. to midnight, Sunday through Thursday, and 8 a.m. to 1:30 a.m. Friday and Saturday, and outdoors until midnight, 7 days per week on property located at 110 Compromise Street.
Thank you. Looks like we've got a number of representatives of the applicants present. Are they able to hear me, Julian? Yes?
Yes,
We
they
are.
should be able to. Yes.
Okay, good. So let's see, if those of you who intend to offer testimony this evening, we'd like to swear you in. So if you would raise your right hand, this is the honor system since I can't see some of you. Do you swear or affirm, subject to penalties for perjury, that the testimony you're about to give is true to the best of your knowledge?
We do.
Okay. Who is going to introduce the case for the city?
I'm going to introduce the case for the city.
All right, Ms. Rouse, please go ahead.
Good evening to the board. This is a special exception application for a standard restaurant with alcoholic beverage service, bars, live entertainment, and seasonal outdoor dining, with proposed hours of operation indoors from 8 a.m. to midnight, Sunday through Thursday, at 8 a.m. to 1:30 a.m. Friday and Saturday, and outdoor hours of operation until midnight, 7 days a week. The applicant is the property owner, 110 Compromise Operator LLC, and the business owner, which is the Phillips Restaurant Group. Property is located at 110 Compromise Street. I think everybody's pretty familiar with the property. It was the first property on the left as you go down to cross over the Eastport Bridge, the new building.
Is that your introduction?
Yeah, I'm going to let the applicant go through, it has been, subject to extensive review, and I'm going to let the applicant explain in detail all of the aspects of this application and how it fits in to the maritime zoning and to the downtown district.
Okay. Who's going to take the lead for the applicant?
I will, Chairman Gallagher. Phil Dale's here.
All right, Phil. Just to remind you, the board has carefully reviewed the staff report and all of the attachments, which I understand is much of what you submitted. I think there's a single public comment. Is that right, Jackie?
Yes, we had one public comment that I forwarded to the board.
Yep.
From the Summer Garden Theater.
Yeah, okay.
So
In support of the application.
Mr. Chair, I'm so sorry. I had a quick question for Ms. Rouse and I was on mute and I couldn't get my question out. I apologize.
Go ahead.
Thank you. I'm so sorry. With regards to the opening times, can you go over that again more slowly? Because what's written was confusing to me.
Okay, so on Sunday through Thursday, on those days, they've asked for an opening time of 8 a.m. to midnight, a closing time of midnight. On Friday and Saturday, the times would be 8 a.m. to 1:30 a.m. and the outdoor times would be presumably from 8 a.m. to midnight. They would be closing at midnight every day of the week outside. Now, let me just say, with regard to time limits within the scope of a restaurant special exception application, is these are limits. Often people will not actually be open that early in the morning. It's just to establish a range of hours in which they can be open. There are many people who will actually even close earlier than the maximum, the latest time in their application. But this gives them, some people use this as a tool of flexibility in terms of they are only open on special occasions till 1:30 or till midnight, or it's a seasonal thing. So the hours have flexibility. You don't have to be open those hours.
Thank you.
All right, Mr. Dales.
Thank you, Chairman Gallagher. Ms. Rouse, before I begin, I just wanted to clarify for the transcript here that the recommendation in the staff report was for approval of the special exception, and that there were several letters received by the department from Alderman Tierney and from the president of the Ward 1 Residents Association in support of the application, correct?
There were, as part of the what we call our interagency review, we sent the project to the Ward 1 Residents Association, and we also sent it to the alderman of the ward, Alderman Tierney, and we did receive through the agency review process, and I believe I referenced that in the staff report, that both the Ward 1 Residents Association and the alderman did indicate support of the project and felt that it would contribute positively to the quality of life and the fabric of the downtown businesses. The only comment that we received outside of that normal process would have been the one that we referenced that we received through I think it was through Civic Plus from the Summer Garden Theater people, which I forwarded to the board. And yes, we are recommending approval of the project.
All right, Mr. Dales, the reason I mentioned that we've read all that stuff is that you don't need to go over everything. The things you think need emphasis or that you think we might have trouble understanding, or use your judgment, but we've read everything. We don't need to hear it all again.
Thank you for that, Mr. Chairman. In fact, tonight I wanted to rely on the assumption that the board has read both the statement in support of the application and the staff report to group the criteria of the special exception as I asked questions of the witnesses, to just confirm that they have read the statement and agree with it and that they believe it meets the criteria in these groups of code provisions so that we can save time.
Good.
So thank you again, and good evening to all members of the board and everyone on the call. I'm Phil Dales. I am here representing the Phillips Restaurant Group and 110 Compromise Operator, the owner of the property, as applicants for a special exception on a standard restaurant subject to the standards of 2164. On the call here, we also have Steve Phillips, CEO of Phillips Restaurant Group, and Dean Flowers, who is the president COO. They are the restaurant business owners. And we also have John Bruno and Mike Keenan, who are the owners of 110 Compromise that owns the property. Leah Wilson and Marshall Harris are architects who are also advocates for the applicant tonight. The purpose of this presentation is just to create a record of compliance with all the criteria in 21-26-050, as well as 21-64-300 and 540. As I told the chair, I'm hoping not to go through each of those criteria individually, but to at least create the record here with the hearing that there was testimony to each of those necessary provisions. As we noted, you do have the statement and the staff report that I'll make reference to frequently. If there are any questions about what's in the statement on the subjects I discussed, please interrupt me and ask, and I can clarify anything that you'd like to know. So I will say that the basics, the fundamentals of our request are for a 2-level restaurant. On the first floor, we would have 176 indoor seats and 64 outdoor seasonal seats. On level 2, we would have 112 indoor seats, 106 outdoor seasonal seats, only available when the weather is good. In total, we'd have 288 seats. I'm sorry, I misspoke. It's 288 indoor seats and 174 outdoor seats. So it's a total, if everything were open at the same time, of 462 seats. In the building currently are several maritime tenants, and so the addition of this restaurant will be compliant with the maritime uses of 21-46-020. So as Ms. Rouse mentioned, this property is familiar to all of us. It's a prominent part of an important area of the city. City Dock is a landmark for locals and for visitors. And the recent history of 110 has been highly public, with debate over the redevelopment of former Fawcett Marine Building, and then revisions to the applicable zoning provisions, and then multiple Historic Preservation Committee reviews and certificates of approval. Since the departure of Fawcett over 10 years ago, the site has been at least substantially vacant and closed off to the public. And this application seeks to change that and return a lively space for people to connect and for dining and enjoyment of the waterfront that is somewhat limited in our restaurant scene in the city. Especially after what we're going through right now, it would be welcome to see smiling faces and hear the friendly sounds of faintly clinking glasses as we walk by this address. The restaurant operator who is applying for the right to do that tonight is someone you're also probably familiar with, is Steve Phillips and his family's restaurants that bring a wealth of experience and Maryland seafood history to this property, as well as institutional knowledge. It's the perfect tenant for this very well-known space in that it adds accountability and Maryland character to a property that really is too important to go without those things. So with that being said, I'm going to call Mr. Steve Phillips to tell you a little bit about his business and this proposal, just so that we can have the board understand from him directly what we're asking for here tonight. Steve, are you on the line?
Yes, can you hear me?
I can. A little bit quiet. Everyone else, can you hear Steve?
Yeah, I can hear him.
Okay. Anyway, I want to thank everybody for their time and consideration for the project for the downtown Annapolis. Of course, as most everyone knows, I live in Annapolis, and you know I'd like to certainly have a restaurant there as part of our Phillips heritage. I think it's a wonderful location. You know, we're pretty much a restaurant. We're not really known as a bar. I mean, you know, we are planning on doing a Phillips crab house concept. You know, on the first floor, you know, with steamed crabs and Maryland seafood, and hopefully some of the watermen where we can unload crabs right at the dock, so the public can witness. You know, crabs being unloaded by a waterman right directly to a restaurant, and the crabs being cooked there. They're trying to really focus on Maryland seafood, that Maryland heritage. I mean, you go alleys where all the watermen used to tie up. So, you know, I'm kind of really excited about, you know, doing that concept. The concept up above is going to be called Maxine's, and it's more of a very laid back, relaxed atmosphere, you know, with chaise lounges and wicker furniture and pottery and greenery. It's more of a whole different concept than the restaurant downstairs. What we're looking at for that whole location is really two separate concepts, two separate restaurants that will operate differently and probably attract you know, different clientele. I would imagine.
Thank you very much.
But you know, yeah.
I didn't mean to cut you off. If you have more to say, by all means, keep going. But I do have some other questions that may, you know, get to some of these. If you're okay with me going forward.
No, I think I summed it up. You know, we and I don't. If someone has any questions, I'll be happy to try to answer them.
We will come to that in a bit here. Let me first just ask.
Yeah.
In our discussions, you've become familiar with the requirements of 2126 on special exceptions in the city code, right?
Yes.
And you read the statement that we prepared with your input and filed this application, correct?
Correct.
So the first two criteria in 2126.050 have to do with public welfare and the effect on adjacent properties. So if you could just tell the board about the decisions and your company's approach to hiring your personnel, so that they understand the types of people who are going to be running this restaurant and the way that that'll affect its relationship with its neighbors on the city dock. That'd be great.
Well, yeah, and then we had a restaurant before in Annapolis, and we had an excellent, which I consider an excellent relationship, you know, with the one downtown. We really had no problems at all working with the community. I mean, you know, we're part of the community. We'll be part of the community there, and we want to make sure that we don't interfere with you know, other people's activities or cause any sort of you know, harm or damage or noise, you know, that would affect anyone else's operation. And that's not how you get along with your neighbors, is it?
No, and thank you. That would apply throughout your company culture to your employees, your business partners, and in the way that you manage your customers' activity while they're inside the restaurant, right?
Say that again.
And that would apply throughout your company's culture for how you manage not only your employees, but your business partners, those contractors you might do business with, and your customers' behavior while they're on and around your property, right?
Oh, we have to certainly manage that, and we've, you know, over the many years we've been in business, we have been very successful in managing those issues.
And from your past experience and your knowledge of the area as a resident, it's your belief that the business beginning in this building will not only do no harm to the properties nearby, but actually add to the value of living there as you plan on being a good corporate and restaurant neighbor, correct?
Correct.
Thank you very much. And I appreciate that description of the business, your company's history, and your plans for the property. I'm going to call Leo Wilson now. We may have some additional small questions for you just to confirm later on, but that'll be it for now. Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Okay. Well, thank you very much for the opportunity to explain.
Thank you. Mr. Chairman, I'd now ask Mr. Leo Wilson to come forward or unmute his line so I can ask a few questions of him and have him walk through the architectural drawings briefly.
Okay.
Mr. Wilson, you there?
I am.
Great. Okay, I can see you now too. All right. So if you would just, for the record, say your name, company name, and address, and briefly your experience doing business in the city.
Sure. So my name is Leo Wilson. I'm with Hammond Wilson Architects here in Annapolis. Our office is over in Eastport on the corner of 4th and Chesapeake. And I've been practicing architecture here for, oh gosh, I think it's probably 28 years or so.
Thank you very much. And can you confirm that the special exception was accurately described in our statement in support of the application?
I can.
Okay, and Ms. Rouse's staff report is also accurate in her description of the project and her application of the standards to our proposal, correct?
That's correct.
All right, thank you. So I want to introduce now to the board a set of drawings that Leo will share on his screen so that everyone can see them. We sent those earlier to the clerk through Julian, and I understand they're already part of the record with our application, but Leo's going to put them onto the screen now for public to view on YouTube and for the board members to see here on this call. And Leo, once you're up and running, you can just go ahead and walk through these drawings and the site plan diagrams and the schematics, including the refuse plan, so the board understands what we're physically proposing here.
Sure. Can everyone see my screen?
Looks good.
Yes.
Great. So I'll move through this fairly quickly. I know that you're all aware of the history of the project and often visit downtown and know what it looks like. Just as a preamble to all of this, we've already been through site design plan review for the project in its entirety, and also all of the proposed changes to the second floor and the entry to the building and other changes have been reviewed and approved by the Historic Preservation Commission. So this would be our last step in the entitlement process in order to move forward with the building permits for the building itself and then the fit out for the restaurants. So I'll just move through this. Here's a screenshot of what it might look like from outside. Let me see if I can move to the next screen here. Photographs, again, this package is one that was submitted with the application, so I know you're familiar with it. Some shots of the building as it sits in its context along Eagle Alley and of course Compromise Street. Here's a diagram of the building, and what you'll see here is the first floor, which shows where Whalertown is, our first tenant. And then Oasis Marina has taken the other piece that faces onto Compromise, and then also faces onto the Donner parking lot. You'll see some common spaces here for entry and safe exit in these three gray areas. And then finally, the yellow area is the first floor area that will be occupied by Phillips Seafood. You'll see the walkway that was built by 110 as part of an agreement with the city that connects Compromise out to the water along this edge. You'll also see a covered area outside where we've got some shedder tanks here, some sorting tanks. The idea is we'll have some boats on the outside that would come watermen, and they would be able to bring their product up onto the deck. And then people walking by, not just a restaurant customers, but also just the general public would be able to see some of that process happen along the way. And then finally, the outdoor dining deck that sits along the walkway along Ego Alley. So it's raised up just a little bit to provide a separation between the open public way and the dining area itself. There's also green space provided in the parking lots and along the walkways, and those are per prior agreements with this Planning and Zoning Office for the site design review. Here you just have a couple of diagrams here. These are really more safety diagrams, so I'm not sure I'm going to spend much time on those. It just provides information on the exiting for the building. What we've got on this sheet is just a blow up. One of the things that we're asked to make sure we have a clear understanding of is how refuse would be handled at the property. It used to be we could put the stuff in dumpsters and just take it out, but now we're being asked to try and contain odors and other problems associated with refuse in the building. So we've included an indoor trash room here with a compactor for recyclables. The plan is to contain the trash in here during the workday, and at the end of the day, to come down this exit path through the building and then go out to the dumpsters, which are situated on the property. They're over in the parking lot in this area here. You can see that. So let's go to the next one. Bear with me. So again, this is more safety requirements for the drawing, talking about occupant loads and exit paths. All this has been through preliminary review with the plans reviewer at the city. Again, we'll be asked to go back through that process when we come in for the building permit to confirm that the occupant loads and exit widths are suitable for what we intend to do. This drawing shows what the building currently includes, which is open space where the restaurant goes. The exits are already configured. The openings to the exterior of the building are already in place on the first floor. And essentially the core and shell of the building is in place right now. On the second floor, we've got this space closest to Compromise is occupied by the boat shows. And so our space that's remaining for the restaurant use is on the waterfront side here with outdoor areas, a trellised area, and some indoor space. Through a series of meetings with the city, we were able to come up with some plans for, and with Steve Phillips, plans for the first floor, which includes dining area along the perimeter of the building. And then our kitchen space is back in this area. It's an open kitchen concept. We've got outdoor space over here, toilet rooms over here, exits are already configured, and a lounge area over here for people waiting to be seated. This is the entry stair to Maxine's on the second floor.
A question, Leo?
Yes.
Where are the doors or windows or movable panels that you open up to bring in the outside view and air?
Okay, so on the first floor, we've got overhead doors at the corner here near the Donner lot and Ego Alley. And that wraps around on these three panels over here are operable right now. And then finally, there's two more operable panels over here. They're situated so that we can open up the building to the water in some areas. And this is kind of a neat corner here because the view shed from downtown cuts through the building right here. And while we didn't take the building down and kept it, we decided to open this corner up so you could look through the building if you were to walk along the walkway.
On the second floor?
Well, I'm coming up to that. That's the next slide. Here's a blow up of the outdoor dining area. Again, you can see tables situated on the deck, landscape elements placed between the parking and the deck area, and then the open walkway that's been left in place per prior agreements with the city.
Leo,
Yes.
this is Nadine. What is the barrier between the sidewalk and the seating in this area you're talking about?
Right here where my cursor is?
Yeah.
So there's steps at this location, and this location, and there's 2 steps up to the deck. And then this is open cable rail assembly that sits on the edge here.
Okay.
So it's open. They're removable for when the boat show takes use of the space, so we can take those out, but there's a railing for safety that separates this area from the upper area, but it's all open.
Dr. Chen, I think in answer to your question, Leo's noting that there are steps between the public walkway and the dining area, but what's the elevation difference, Leo? Because the main separation is the fact that it's sort of up above, where there's a curb really between the 2 spaces.
Yeah, it's 2 steps, so it's about a foot.
Okay, yeah, the reason I asked the question is because keeping the public walkway open, if patrons would somehow be standing in the public walkway waiting to get into the restaurant.
Yeah,
But
so
it sounds like that's not going to be the case.
we don't believe so. Our primary entry point is over here.
Good.
So our hostess table is right here. You can see that. And so the idea would be people would park or on either side. The entry comes up through here. And then the staging area for people to come inside is up on this deck area here.
Thank you.
So then we go to the second floor, and through prior agreements with the Historic Preservation Commission and the city, received permission to enclose some of this pergola with, again, these opening doors that Chairman Gallagher had asked about. So those panels happen here, 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 and then around this room on the side as well. So the outdoor area is here. And this is seasonally open area where if it's nice enough to do so, we'll open those doors. But the ability to close it provides for us to use that space during the winter months or when it's too cool to have them open. And again, we've got an open kitchen concept over here with some back of house space in this area. Emergency exit through this area over here. A second means of egress is over here. And then our main stairway comes up over from the parking lot outside up into the deck. And then the entry for Maxine's, the formal entry, is right here. And there's the hostess station. The roof plan shows the configuration of the architectural elements around the main building. And then this dashed line indicates the limit that we agreed to with historic preservation to keep any mechanical equipment that's necessary for the operation of the restaurant in this area so that it's not visible from the ground as you walk around the building or by it on the street. Elevations of the building, these are somewhat difficult to read only because there's a lot of movement in terms of where the facades move back and forth as related to the perimeter of the building. But here you'll see the side that that is visible from the Donner lot. So over here we have a snag-a-slip in this area over here. And then, oh, I'm sorry, I got myself confused here. This is Whalertown over here. And then this is my main entry for the restaurant over here. So these kind of show what we had before. And then this is the new stair that's part of the approval we got through site design review that takes you up into Maxine's. At the same configuration of drawings here, these were the elevations that were presented and improved through the HPC. We did make a few window modifications in order to facilitate the floor plans that were required for operation of the restaurant. So a couple minor changes to the windows. We included the HPC comments only because we wanted to make sure that there wasn't a separation between what they approved and what you approved. These are the same drawings. So again, here you've got the elevation that phases compromise. So this is where Whalertown is right now. This is where Oasis Marina is, and here are the offices for the Annapolis boat shows. And then finally on the waterfront side, here you can see the dock. These are the operable windows on the first floor, the overhead elements. They repeat again over here, tucked back in. And then finally at the top, I'll go down here, you can see the new opening elements on the second floor. Details on the stair, again, these are reviewed and approved by HPC. It's following the same kind of vocabulary that we established with the railing assemblies on the deck that you can see there now. A little more detail on them. You can see the cable rail assemblies that run in front of the building to keep it light. Details for how that's built and some precedent images. This is the exterior lighting that is anticipated for the building. You'll see the fixtures are picked out over here. We spent a good deal of time with HPC and planning and zoning to ensure that the light levels were consistent with what they would like to have on the water. None of the fixtures are directly visible from the public way. They're all recessed or set into the deck. Again, they're repeated over here, the same type of fixtures. Here they are in the deck. Here they are in the covering for the covered entry area. And again, they repeat again on the upper floor. The only lights that we anticipate being visible from a distance are the exit lights, which are required by code. This detail shows how they're recessed up into the pergola assembly that forms the ceiling. So we decided to do a couple renderings because it's so hard to read the two-dimensional images. And here you'll see the first floor that tried to pick up the character of the building that was there when it was faucets, only we took all the cinder block and covered that with brick, created larger openings to create activity in the building that was visible from outside, so to connect the inside to the outside. Again, you may recall when this was faucets, this was all one flat plane of masonry. And then this corner was open where the loading dock is. And we've repurposed the space so that we can provide the entry over here rather than the loading. It's interesting that our hope is to be able to bring in watermen to unload right there. So I think that'll be a nice recollection of what this space was used for at one time.
Yeah, one question. Where would the live music happen?
So the live music is all intended to happen inside. We don't have any outside music. And if we go back to the first floor plan, let me just go back here real quick. The live music area on the first floor, I think we have that set up over in this area.
Got it. And will it be on the second floor as well?
Phil, I can't recall if we have second floor music set up. We may have
I don't
inside.
believe we do. Marshall, can you confirm that? I think Leo was in the right place with that cursor for the first floor. If Marshall's there and unmuted, it'd be great to chime in.
Yes, on the second floor, right beneath the shared exit stair at the bottom.
Okay, so yeah, towards the lot, Leo, further.
There's a heavy dashed line.
Right in here, Marshall?
No, down the shared exit next to the elevator.
There you go. Yep, you're closer, Leo.
Over.
That's where the live entertainment would be, on the second floor.
Oh, right in here. Yeah, I'm sorry.
Yep, exactly.
This box here, right, Marshall?
Yep, correct. Yeah, on both ends, there's a dark dashed line that indicates where we intend on having the live music.
There's a very small stage.
Correct.
So then if we go back to the three-dimensional images here, That's what we think it would look like during the day. You can see that the second floor is pushed back. We've provided some greenery. We have approval for a couple of umbrellas outside to provide some shade. We took them out of the corner where the open view shed from downtown is. And then finally, an image that would show what it might look like in the evening. So we're excited about reactivating this building. We think, it's been a long road for the owners and for the city too. And so I think what we've got here is a successful way to put this building back into use at a time it's important to do so. And then this last slide I'm going to show, this is from the city dock revamping that we were a part of as a volunteer. But one of the images we created showed kind of the open space over here. We were fortunate enough to be able to include some imagery of the building as it might look from a distance. And so we like the fact that it creates a kind of a more active location here along the waterfront that seems to be missing, and provides a little bit of context from the history of the building, the history of how this space was used on the water, and should be a big part of reactivating and reimagining what this whole city dock area will look like.
Which one of those big boats on the end is yours?
Well, I think this is the one I'm looking at right now.
Good.
Sure it's not the dinghy, Leo?
Well, this is the one I have, but that's the one I'm looking at.
Oh, they're both his. He just leases one out to the public.
So
Thank you, Leo.
with that, I'm done everything I wanted to say, and I'll answer questions.
Yeah, for the questions, I want to just, like I said at the beginning of this presentation, in groups of code criteria, just connect them to the presentation you just made. So after that, we don't need to go through each criterion by itself. I'll just ask Leo with section 21-26050, A through F, so I'm leaving off G here. Those criteria relate to health, safety, and welfare, the other nearby properties, which Mr. Phillips already testified to, adequate utilities, access, and facilities, ingress and egress, and the comprehensive plan, and how this use fits in with the comprehensive plan. You've read the statement and verified that you find it to be accurate. With that in mind, is it your opinion that the plans you just showed and the statement demonstrate compliance with those criteria?
It is. We spent a considerable amount of time working with staff at Planning and Zoning and going back and forth with different components of this build to make sure that we were in compliance. And it's our belief that through those discussions, we were able to get to a point where we meet them completely.
Okay, thank you. And now we'll jump ahead to 21-64-300. The relevant parts there are B through G. For Leo, Mr. Wilson, would you speak to the site design plan requirements related to functioning of kitchens and the noise that you can expect from this building as designed, and the refuse plan and what that does for the requirements to keep trash maintained orderly? You've already walked us through a lot of that. Can you just confirm for the board that what you've just shown them, and that includes the site design plan criteria in 21-22, all of this conforms with the requirements here in 21-64-300 B through G?
We do. I was part of the original discussions for the property when we decided we wanted to redevelop it with Mr. Bruno and Mr. Keenan. And we had discussions with Summer Garden Theater, and they explained to us what their concerns were and their time constraints. And so the configuration and location of the restaurants is purposefully set away from our most sensitive neighbor to make sure that that we don't impede on what they're trying to do. And as a matter of fact, we think it might be kind of nice because it'll provide another dining place for people before and after. So yes, we do believe we meet all those criteria.
Thank you. And we've now received obviously a letter of approval and a recommendation of support from Summer Garden Theater. And so Mr. Phillips, just a couple of the criteria in this section relate to restaurant operations. So if you could briefly just confirm for us that the operations of the restaurant we described in the statement of support that's written and the board's had time to review are all accurate, and state that we will make sure that the noises from the restaurant are minimalized, there will be no loitering allowed, and there will be no trash or litter from people using the restaurant. You wouldn't allow that for one of your restaurants?
Certainly not. No, it's very important that we maintain, food safety standards and proper sanitation, making sure the property is kept neat, the trash cleaned up, no unpleasant odors. In regards to if we do have entertainment, most likely when we do entertainment, it's like a piano player. We don't create excessive noise, with entertainment. So yes, I feel that we can comply to all those requests.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Phillips. And Mr. Wilson, the last set of questions here for you. This is section 2164 540F, which is specifically about a restaurant in the WMC Maritime Zone. And most of those criteria relate to outdoor dining. So for the outdoor dining and rooftop area, I want to make sure that we all understand this is only going to allow for operations until midnight, and that alcohol would only be served outside while the kitchens are open, that there would be no bar dancing or live entertainment outside. We've already stated that. You said that earlier, Mr. Wilson, and that the ratio of outdoor to indoor seats applies with this section. There cannot be more than 75% of the outdoor seat or the indoor seats as outdoor seats. And then finally, you went through the lighting plan. Can you confirm for us that the statement accurately describes the lighting plan, that your architectural sheets accurately show the lighting plan, and that the lighting plan, and then finally noise mitigation efforts that you put into your plans conform with the requirements and allow this site to conform with the requirements of 2164 540F?
So the project complies with all of those standards, Mr. Dow.
Thank you very much. Okay, that's it from Mr. Wilson and Mr. Phillips. And just as a closing statement, I want to say that we've tried to keep this as brief as we could for a fairly large application and a very important building. And as the chairman noted, and as I noted, we're relying on your familiarity with our statement in support of this application, as well as the staff report, and know that those two documents have include a lot of facts that we've offered and analysis of the legal standards. And we're hopeful that in your deliberations and then ultimately your opinion, you would incorporate some of those findings of fact, or those facts in your findings of fact, and rely on some of the legal analysis we put there to confer with your counsel, who's on this this virtual meeting here with us today. Okay, thank you very much, and that'll conclude our argument. We'll be here for answering any of your questions about what we've said here tonight.
Thank you, Mr. Dale. Questions from members of the board?
Good, Bob.
I'm good. No-
I have some clarifying questions.
Okay.
If you could, whoever, address the walkway that abuts the Donner lot. I believe I heard that the city had asked that that walkway be put in place to allow access to the public walkway around Ego Alley. Was the intent that there be free passage
Dr. Chen,
along that walkway?
I'll begin the answer, and I think Leo can add to it since he was part of the planning of that easement. We did an analysis of the easement that allows pedestrian traffic from Compromise to the walkway along Ego Alley, and found that the intent of that easement, in our opinion, is to make sure that there will be pedestrian flow possible from Compromise to the alley, but does not preclude the placement of tables. Our understanding is that the approval here tonight should approve the seating in that area, similarly to the way the board would approve seating on any city sidewalk, that it would be approved subject to us acquiring the necessary permits from the city to place tables on that public walkway space.
That's right. And there's a second part of it, though, to answer that question. Initially, when we came in, there were discussions about how big those tables can be. And through discussions with planning and zoning, requirement is to maintain 5 feet clear along that walkway at all times. So even though there may be some tables and planters along the way, there'll be adequate space for pedestrian passage through whatever happens there.
And so, Leo, you're saying that was the width that was actually placed into that easement was chosen to allow the 5 foot minimum pedestrian clear plus some space for seating, correct?
That's correct. I think the walkway is just over 10 feet right now.
Great, thank you.
So by limiting the size of the tables, that's an acknowledgement of the intent that that walkway be a passageway for pedestrians?
That's right. That just makes sure that we will always maintain the minimum 5-foot clear for pedestrian traffic. And those tables, Leo, are just 2-seaters. Is that right? Or is there a 4-seater in there?
I believe that's correct. I think, that'll all be reviewed as part of a sidewalk permit, should we get that far. But yes, the clear intent is to maintain pedestrian passage from Compromise to City Dock, unimpeded by whatever we do there.
Okay.
So it is an easement.
That's right.
It is an easement.
Okay. With regard to the parking spaces, in your drawings, those are public city parking spaces in the Donner lot, as well as the one that's on the Fleet Reserve side of the building?
Yeah, there's two different pieces of it. The piece on the Donner lot is city property, and they own and operate that. There's a smaller lot adjacent to Newman Street across from the Fleet's entry that, again, the city operates. And then the third component of it is directly behind the raised dockside dining in that area, and the area along the building nearest where the old entry to Fawcett's was. That's owned by this property.
That's right. And
so,
just to provide some
sorry.
additional information that you're probably already aware of is that there isn't a parking requirement for the restaurant, but in fact, the restaurant will have use of the spaces during outside of regular business, of all the spaces outside of regular business hours for the current tenants in the building.
And the reason I asked the question is because one of the conditions is that there be free valet parking, and also that applicants shall be required to provide free off-street parking for all employees. How many employees are you envisioning, and where are you intending to park them?
Dr. Chen, I think the clarification there should be that the condition you're referring to, and I hope Ms. Rouse will jump in on this as well, is now a standard condition for restaurant approvals, special exception restaurant approvals, and that requirement is imposed in the event that the Department of Planning and Zoning finds there to be a parking issue there. It's not necessarily imposed. If we are required to provide valet during certain times, we would do so. But the idea is that the only times in which we would expect the need to possibly do valet even will be at times when the restaurant was completely full, all the indoor and outdoor seats, and that some parking issue were found by the Department of Planning and Zoning. But Ms. Rouse, would you clarify some of that, please?
Yeah, the valet parking is a standard condition. There are restaurants who choose from the very beginning to utilize that, as not all the time, but often it's something that they will do in the evenings or when it's very busy, that they will set up a valet service. The off-street parking that is required for employees, that really is up to the operator of the business to come up with a game plan for how they're going to be able to meet that requirement. As I understand it from numerous conversations with other restaurants, not all of the employees who work in restaurants actually drive to and from work. They're just, so it's really up for them to figure it out. And the intent of that requirement, which we added as a requirement for downtown restaurant use a few years ago, is to mitigate the impact of parking in the residential areas by employees of downtown businesses.
And I'd also add that we acknowledged in conversation with the Department of Planning and Zoning, and I believe in our statement, that we would have a policy for employees with parking. And once we understand how the employees are getting to and from work, that we would incentivize them to either not drive or to park off of any neighborhood streets that are residentially designated parking areas.
And so first of all, how many employees do you envision? And then secondly, what does that, would you incentivize them, for example, to park in Hillman Garage?
Well, Dr. Chen, I think first we need to expand our workforce, but the number of employees, I can ask Mr. Flowers and Mr. Phillips to provide an estimate. It's uncertain right now exactly how many we'd have at any given time in the building, but we're just not that far along, have not built out the restaurant and developed it, but as an estimate, Steve or Dean, could you please let Dr. Chen know what that expectation would be?
You talking to me, Phil?
Yeah, Steve or Dean. Steve, since you're here, would you give an estimate of how many employees we'd expect at any given time in the building?
Well, it's certainly going to vary wintertime versus summertime, as we all know. You know, and normally we have, you know, shifts of workers that come in. I really haven't done the calculation on it.
Okay. I think we may have stated this somewhere to the
The time of,
been asked to estimate it. I'm going to see if we.
You know, I know, like, you know, a lot of people, you know, that work for us, a lot of them ride their bikes into work. You know, they don't even want to.
That's part of our understanding, the need that we need to develop is to figure out how many of the employees that would be there are actually using cars or need parking. So I think in one of our email conversations with staff, we did provide our best guess at how many employees would be in one shift at a time. But we certainly don't have a sense of how many of them would be driving. We did acknowledge that we would create policies to make sure that they were not parking on residential streets and that we would incentivize them or provide them incentives to park in the public garages or on public streets.
We have applicants approach, Nadine, applicants approach this in different manners depending on, you know, how it ultimately works out in terms of their hours of operation and, you know, when they open and when they close. And it's really something that becomes, you know, as they move towards the point where they're getting ready to open, that they would be establishing a plan for how they are going to provide parking if needed for their employees. And I would say also that since we've added this requirement for restaurants downtown, we do not anymore, as far as I know, continue to have a lot of complaints from the Ward 1 Residents Association or through the aldermen about restaurant employees or other business employees parking on the residential streets. It's become less of a, it really does seem to have mitigated the impact from that.
That's super helpful.
There are many creative solutions to providing parking, you know, throughout the city for restaurant employees. I know in Eastport, for example, some of the restaurants actually have lots that they have leased other places where they get all their employees to park. There are just a variety of options to pursue. And as Mr. Phillips said, a lot of the restaurant employees, you know, they could be riding motorbikes or bicycles, or even, you know, there are other ride sharing, there Uber. There are lots of ways that they get back and forth to work.
Okay, Nadine, do you have more questions?
No.
Andrew?
No, I'm good, thank you.
Rob?
I have anything additional.
Christian? I'll try a couple. So, Jackie, it's usual for you to suggest limiting music to indoors, is that right?
Yes.
Right, good. So I'm concerned the live music location on the first floor is right where those overhead doors are going to be open. You might as well be outside. How is that consistent with your usual approach?
Well, I think I believe, I am trying to remember, I think we have discussed this with the applicant, and I think we had the same question, Leo, did we not, about how we would mitigate that? They're going to have to, you know, if they have, what I'm visualizing is that if they had all the doors open, that they would probably not be playing live music with the doors open at those locations, or they might put it in a different place.
Why don't we make that a condition? Is that agreeable?
Well, how about if we consider this option? You know,
Let
it's a
me
whole
first,
different thing.
Leo, before you suggest that, I want to go back to that sheet if we can. If you can share your screen. I think where we indicated this, the live music location, the first floor wasn't quite right. If you look at the first floor plan, I think that's
That sheet A1.
A1.1A. The live music area is in that darker hashed black, and it's not as close to the corner as you may have been indicating during, yeah, there it is. So, you know, and does that help at all as you propose the suggestion here? The chairman's concerned that the live music may have been closer to the corner in the outdoor area.
So,
Bob,
Leah,
can
can you just identify with that little cursor of yours where the overhead doors are on this page?
There's 1, 2, 3, 4 in place right now, and this is over in this area here. So it's not directly adjacent to the openings. It's set towards the center of the restaurant. We had initially proposed right in this corner here, and that's when we got feedback from planning and zoning that we really don't want it there because it seemed to work pretty well from a plan standpoint. And we like the idea of having it there, but we were asked to pull it back into the center of the building.
Bob, I'd love weighing on here with a little historical context. We've had this noise issue come up before with emanating from buildings, whether they're poorly constructed, have large overhead doors, or just small. The city ordinance backstops noise levels beyond the purview of this board. They have to comply with it, and I would suggest that the ambient noise level of an active, vigorous city dock in that area is probably represents a greater threat than the piano acoustic. But I'm open to conditions that will survive an appeal.
We can come back to that. We can think about that for next time. I guess that there have always been questions raised about whether anybody enforces the code provisions on noise, but
well, noise there is enforcement of noise, and it's really on a complaint basis.
Yeah. Okay. So speaking of enforcement, I believe I read that with respect to one of these 3 restaurants, or maybe all of them, that there's a requirement that there won't be disposable plates and utensils. Is that right?
For a standard restaurant, that's true.
Okay, and so we've heard complaints about another standard restaurant that we approved a few years ago, where they are using the disposable items and there's no enforcement of that. Is there anything we can do in processing this special exception that will make that enforcement problem go away?
For this restaurant or that restaurant?
This one.
Well, it's a requirement. It's
a requirement for the other one too.
Yes.
I don't think this board has enforcement powers. We have the ability to set the parameters, and if we set them like we do in others, it's not up to us to enforce what has been suggested and required.
Well, my question there, Andrew, is I believe the new boilerplate that we use at the end of variances anyway, I'm not sure about special exceptions, is that if they don't operate in accordance with the terms, then they don't have the permission. So moving that requirement from representations to conditions, it's my understanding, would enhance enforceability. Am I wrong about that?
Mr. Chairman, if I can propose something, as attorney is usually getting calls from clients that are subject to these kinds of complaints, I think what you're onto is a good suggestion in terms of how you write the approvals. It may not be necessary to make it to beat down with a hammer that the approval is contingent on compliance with all these requirements. I think that's already implicit. What might be helpful is clarifying language that failure to comply with the condition constitutes a zoning violation. That language would then be helpful for staff, in my opinion, in responding to complaints and telling the owners of the restaurants they would be subject to citations for the violations that would be clear from the face of your approval if that's stated directly.
That sounds like a creative solution. And if you want to think about that more and raise it again when we meet the next time. Sorry, Christian.
I was going to ask, does the city even have a recourse for restaurant owners who's, I mean, is that a civil penalty that's appealable? And is there, I mean,
A civil,
who submits the evidence that the plastic, we're getting a little far afield here, but it's,
right.
This is the one that I brought up, so I feel personally compelled to ask this. 3 or 4 times I've raised the point that the restaurant in question continues to use disposable cutlery and nothing changes. So.
Well, I think that okay, you're talking about a place, an unnamed place here. I'm not familiar with with these complaints, but so let's set that aside. I think that's, and talk, there is a requirement in the conditions, which is condition 11, that you have to operate, the special exception approval shall be applicable to the premises only as long as the establishment is constructed, operated, and maintained in accordance with the approved plans and conditions or any other, so there are plans and conditions in place. And part of the whole project is that you have to demonstrate that you are, actually, I'm looking at 12, in conformance with all applicable rules, regulations, and codes. That's already a requirement in the conditions that you're supposed to be operating in conformance with the code. I don't know that we need
we can take this. We can take this in a separate forum because
I think that we need to have
faith of the Phillips organization will comply. The other unnamed national chain I worry about.
I will say that I'm fairly certain I know who you're discussing, and when they, and I don't know why there was never any definitive enforcement done on them, their failure to operate in conformance with approvals. They have subsequently had applied for some amendments to their approval, and we told them that they could not move forward with that until they brought themselves into conformance, and that was.
Jackie, we could spend the rest of the quarantine talking about not complying with conditions, specifically maintaining a 5-foot clear path on sidewalks, free from obstructions from tables and chairs and placard signs, et cetera, et cetera.
Well, I think the city has taken steps. For example, there are new signs, the placard signs on the sidewalks, that is being enforced. I know for a fact that prior to.
Jackie, you don't have to defend the city. I was just, I was making a point that we could go on ad nauseum here, but.
I hope Joelle is taking notes.
Yeah.
And talk to Joelle.
We'll have an internal discussion about enforcement and get back.
You and I can get together and wear each other out, all right?
My last question has to do with the 5-foot walkway. My sense is that if that's lined with tables, most people, not Jackie, are going to be intimidated and doubtful about whether they're welcome to walk down through that pathway close to all those tables. So my suggestion would be, and we can talk about it next time, is that if the tables are going to be there, I think there ought to be a sign out at the sidewalk that says public access walkway.
I would think that's acceptable and appropriate, and we can confirm that with the owners of the property and the owners of the restaurant. And if you want to let us know that's acceptable, that's fine. I think for me, it seems like a very reasonable solution.
Okay. All right. Well, let's see. Tammy will mark and admit the staff report and all the attachments, including the lovely drawings that Leo has showed us. And we'll also accept into the record the public comment that we had from the Garden Theater. And unless there's anything else on this case, we will recess the hearing in this special exception application until our next meeting, which will be July 7th.
No, okay.
Is that right, Jackie?
Okay, so we are not having a meet. I thought we're not having a meeting the third week in June.
I haven't heard about one.
Right, okay. I think we didn't have anything to advertise, so you would be, let me just double check since this is so important. Yeah, the next meeting would be July 7th.
Thank you. All right. I think ever since I've been chair, when I ask if there's any new business, there hasn't been any, but let me raise something. When I recused myself this evening, and it probably was in Nadine's mind as well, what drove me to do that was a concern to protect the integrity of the board's process and decisions. It seems to me that those who have interest in the cases that come before us could easily take advantage of that by sending any of us who they thought would not be sympathetic to their point of view an email or making a call with the idea of disqualifying us from the hearing in their case. So let's think about it till next time, but my suggestion here would be that we all agree among ourselves that if we get any calls or emails or any other communications like this, we will immediately shut them down and notify each other and Jackie. And in my view, if we've done that, there won't be any need for us to recuse ourselves because someone has intentionally or unintentionally tried to taint us.
Fine with me.
So,
I don't like people
Chairman,
anyway.
Can you clarify for me, because I do receive what I consider unwanted email communications, and I'm not certain. You tell the person you need to stop sending me emails. It's an ex parte communication. And if they choose not to listen, I mean, what is enough in order
you're going to
to
refer them to the Ethics Commission or the city attorney, because it's a criminal violation of law.
It was particularly unfortunate from, I feel from the applicant's point of view tonight, even though the variance was approved, that they did not have the benefit of being able to hear from the full board. I think that it's, so it's greatly appreciated that by staff that you are talking about how to address this issue, and perhaps our staff attorney, Mr. Braithwaite, this can be discussed with the Office of Law and there can be some policy developed about all of this. But I think Bob's suggestion is excellent at this point in time. We don't want to not be able to have the entire board be able to participate and offer opinions in hearings.
I apologize to everyone. I know this has made me a little grumpy tonight. I'm not usually this grumpy.
Really?
So this is Joel Braithwaite from the Office of Law. Thank you for raising the issue, and we'll be happy to work with the board on training and considering ways we can look to the best practices to how other boards and commissions are able to deal with this, because the issue raised by Chairman Gallagher about offensively using communications to disable members from participation, that does cause us for concern, and we will attempt to make sure that we are protecting our boards and commission members.
Thank you, Joel.
Did
That
we
would be
close
great.
the application for 110 compromise? Did we close that out yet?
Yes, it's closed.
Okay, I was just wondering.
Sorry,
I see that the applicants.
Public hearings continued, Tammy.
Understood, but I mean,
okay.
are they still needing to stay is what I'm asking. I see that.
No, In fact, I'm looking for a motion to adjourn.
Okay, thank you.
You know, I'm always quick to make the motion to adjourn, so I would so move.
Thank you, Andrew. Second.
Second.
All right, all in
Good
favor?
night, all.
Aye. Good
Thank
night.
you. Thank you, applicants and staff, for your patience and great preparation. And we'll see you next time.
Thank you.
Looking forward to it.
Thank you.
Bye.